Action movies have always promised audiences the thrill of impact, the kind of bone-rattling intensity that makes you lean forward in your seat. But behind the polished versions that reach theaters lies another world entirely, a world filled with fight scenes that were once filmed and full edited with care and positioned as defining moments of their stories, only to be erased after a single round of test screenings. These weren't minor adjustments or trimmed punches. They were entire confrontations designed to elevate character arcs deep in tension or push the emotional stakes to the breaking point. Yet all it took was one small room of early viewers for these sequences to vanish without a trace. Some of these lost battles lived briefly in rough-cut showings. Others appeared in early promotional trailers hinting at spectacular confrontations that mysteriously never appeared in the final release. In each case, the decision to remove them came from a combination of audience discomfort, studio caution, or concerns that the footage tilted the film toward a darker, harsher tone. A single note scribbled on a test card, too violent, too long, too intense, became enough to silence work that had taken weeks of choreography and grueling physical commitment to complete. Directors and stunt teams often recall these missing scenes with a mixture of pride and frustration. They saw up close how much effort went into crafting these battles, the bruises, the rehearsal hours, the carefully timed stunts. Yet all that devotion was locked away in vaults or buried inside incomplete work prints, leaving fans to wonder about the versions of their favorite films that existed only briefly seen by a tiny handful of people before being cut down. Tonight, we revisit those forgotten moments, the action sequences that were fully realized, prepared for release, and then abandoned in the shadows after test screenings sealed their fate. Fact 1: Hard Target's Lost Industrial Ambush. Before Hard Target reached theaters in its familiar form, the film carried a much longer and far more elaborate warehouse ambush that showcased the full force of John Woo's stylized brutality. In the original assembly chants, Boudreaux stormed through a grimy industrial maze, dismantling mercenaries with a blend of sharp balletic movement and improvised weapon work. Chains swung, pipes cracked, and bodies tumbled across the concrete floor in a sequence designed to underline Chance's desperation and ferocity. Crew members later described it as one of the most complete action beats shot for the film, a raw, unfiltered look at Woo's signature chaos transplanted onto American soil. But once the footage was screened for a test audience, studio concerns erupted. Several viewers labeled the fight as overwhelming and excessively violent, comments that immediately triggered fears of ratings complications. Universal, locked in a delicate balancing act with the MPAA, worried that the relentless brutality would push the film beyond the acceptable threshold for mainstream release. In response, nearly the entire ambush was carved out of the final edit, reducing what had been an intense atmospheric battle into a faint echo of its original scale. Only a few surviving work prints hint at what the fight looked like before the cuts, fragments of a sequence that once promised to be one of Hard Target's standout moments. Fact 2: Rapid Fire's Erased Back Alley Brawl. Rapid Fire once included a sprawling alley fight that was intended to be one of Brandon Lee's defining showcases. Set in a narrow, shadow-filled passageway, the sequence leaned heavily into realism, emphasizing the snap of joint locks, the thud of body impacts, and the improvised violence of street-level combat. Lee's movements were sharp and efficient, revealing an intensity that bridged his martial arts pedigree with a grounded sense of danger. The scene was choreographed to highlight both his physical speed and his ability to adapt when outnumbered. However, during the film's first test screening, the tone of the confrontation became a point of contention. Some audience members praised its authenticity, but many felt the realism pushed the film into darker territory. Others worried that Lee's character seemed too ruthless in these early stages. Producers, sensing potential friction with ratings boards and fearing a disruption to narrative pacing, opted to remove the entire sequence from the theatrical version. The Lost Alley Brawl is still mentioned by stunt performers who considered it one of the most meticulously crafted fights of the project, a sequence that vanished before general audiences ever knew it existed. Fact 3: American Yakuza's Lost Construction Site Collision. American Yakuza once featured a pivotal brawl staged in an abandoned construction yard, a gritty multi-angle confrontation between the American Mafia and the Japanese Yakuza. The fight unfolded like a whirlwind of steel and concrete, with characters hurling themselves across unfinished scaffolding and battling through piles of discarded building materials. At the center of the chaos was the protagonist, caught between two worlds, forced to face the violence that defined both sides of his fractured loyalty. Crew accounts described the scene as emotionally charged, filled with weapon clashes and grueling physicality that underscored the character's internal conflict. But when the scene was shown to a test audience, feedback grew unexpectedly negative. Some viewers found the sequence too intense, while others wrote that it drained the emotional momentum from the film's next few scenes. Columbia Trista, already navigating uncertainty about the film's tone and market appeal, determined that the confrontation risked overshadowing key character moments. In the end, the entire construction site battle was cut. What remains in the theatrical release is only a faint trace of its existence, a narrative gap where a defining clash once stood. Fact 4. Best of the Best I is missing Coliseum trial. Best of the Best I once carried a grueling arena showdown meant to reveal just how merciless the underground Coliseum truly was. In this removed sequence, Travis Brickley stepped into the cage against an opponent far larger and more brutal than anyone he had faced before. The fight was staged as a war of attrition, heavy swings, punishing body shots, and moments where neither man seemed capable of staying upright. The camera circled the fighters with suffocating closeness, capturing the strain in their muscles and the exhaustion etched across their faces. Crew members later recalled that the scene was designed to break away from clean Hollywood choreography and embrace the uglier reality of bare-knuckle survival. But when the test screening audience watched, the early cut discomfort settled across the room. Many viewers described the confrontation as too punishing, while others felt the relentless brutality drained the film of its emotional cadence. The studio, alarmed at the possibility of alienating mainstream viewers and wary of drawing unwanted attention from ratings boards, decided to cut the sequence entirely. What remained in the final release was merely its narrative shell. The uncut fight, once envisioned as a turning point that defined Travis's fate, faded into obscurity, remembered only through behind-the-scenes accounts and the lingering sense of a moment that was meant to hit much harder. Fact 5. The Quest discarded opening round duel. Among the many global matchups filmed for the Quest, one early tournament duel was intended to highlight the vast range of fighting styles entering the arena. Shot beneath sweeping spotlights and framed with long circular camera movements, the fight showcased a rare blend of techniques: crisp grapples, spinning counters, and a final takedown that sent the crowd erupting. Jean-Claude Van Damme faced off against a fighter who contrasted him perfectly, creating an exchange of styles that gave the sequence its rhythm and charm. For the stunt team, this was one of the most technically satisfying scenes they crafted. However, during the film's test screening, the audience's reaction proved complicated. Several viewers felt the match arrived too early and drew too much attention away from the later rounds. Others commented that the sequence made Van Damme's character appear overly dominant, long before the tournament stakes had escalated. Concerned that the pacing and dramatic structure were being disrupted, producers made the decision to eliminate the duel entirely. Only fragments of footage remain today: a few still photographs, brief rehearsal clips, and faint references and production notes. What was meant to be a vibrant showcase of the tournament's diversity instead became a silent absence in the film's rhythm. Fact 6. Rapid Fire's Lost Campus Attack. Rapid Fire originally contained not one, but two major fight scenes that never reached the public, and the second missing sequence unfolded across a university courtyard at dusk. Jake Lowe, crossing the campus alone, was ambushed by gang members who cornered him between staircases and benches. The confrontation featured crisp, fast-paced choreography, with Jake weaving through architectural obstacles and delivering precise strikes that amplified his growing instinct for survival. The scene was created to mark the moment when Jake shifted from reluctant bystander to active participant in the escalating conflict around him. But when test audiences viewed this version, reactions diverged. Some praised the athleticism of the choreography, while others argued that Jake appeared too capable, too quickly undermining the gradual development of his character. A few viewers also felt uneasy about staging such intense violence in an academic environment. Studio executives, concerned about narrative clarity and tonal consistency, removed the entire sequence. Its absence in the final film creates a noticeable jump in Jake's evolution, a gap that longtime fans still point out. For the stunt performers who worked on it, the campus attack remains one of the most striking scenes the public was never given the chance to see. Fact 7 Bloodsport Eyes Cut Blockhouse Battle. Bloodsport I once opened with a stark, hard-hitting clash set deep within a fortified prison block. In this removed sequence, Alex Cardo was ambushed by multiple inmates in a dim concrete hallway where every punch echoed like a warning. The choreography leaned heavily on raw physicality, elbows driven into ribs, bodies slammed against steel rails, and frantic scrambles for dominance. It was designed to underscore Cardo's desperation, showing a man navigating a brutal world long before he ever stepped into the Kumite. Crew members later recalled that the scene pushed Daniel Bernhardt into one of the most demanding performances of the shoot. But when the film's early cut reached a test audience, responses were sharply divided. Many viewers felt the fight's relentless realism clashed with the stylized martial arts spectacle the series was known for. Others described the violence as claustrophobic and emotionally draining, particularly for an opening scene. Executives, fearing it would set the wrong tone and overshadow the tournament arc to come, opted to cut the sequence entirely. In its final form, Bloodsport I jumps more abruptly into the narrative, leaving behind only hints of the blockhouse encounter. For fans, the missing fight remains one of the most talked about what could have been moments in the film's early assembly. Fact 8 Drive's Missing Diner Chaos. Drive was celebrated for its inventive, high-energy fight choreography, and among the most ambitious scenes shot but never shown was a sprawling diner confrontation early in the film. The removed sequence saw Mark Dacascos weaving between tightly packed tables, sliding across counters, flipping through cramped aisles, and using everyday objects as extensions of his movement. A metal serving tray became a spinning deflection tool. A tower of plates became improvised projectiles. The stunt team crafted the moment as a playful yet technically intricate burst of chaos meant to set the tone for the film's frenetic style. Yet in the test screening phase, the scene split the room. Some viewers cheered its creativity, but others felt overwhelmed by the rapid escalation so early in the story. A few noted that the comedic beats within the choreography clashed with the darker sci-fi elements introduced later. Concerned about tonal consistency and pacing, distributors urged the filmmakers to cut the entire fight from the theatrical release. Today, traces of the diner scene exist only through behind-the-scenes footage and crew anecdotes. Many fans believe it could have stood among the decade's most imaginative action beats, a vivid example of Drive's unique charm that never reached the screen. Fact 9 Showdown in Little Tokyo's Lost Training Hall Uprising. Showdown in Little Tokyo once carried a tense dojo confrontation that was filmed as a direct confrontation with Chris Kenner's past. The deleted scene placed Kenner in a sparsely lit training hall where a group of Yakuza trainees challenged him in a swirling melee of traditional weapons and disciplined strikes. The choreography blended Aikido throws, precision Kenpo hits, and sudden weapon disarms, all captured under stark overhead lights that cast towering shadows across the tatami floor. It was meant to peel back Kenner's stoic facade and expose the trauma that fueled his crusade. But when shown to a test screening audience, the fight landed differently. Viewers complained that the sequence altered the film's tone, dragging it toward darker psychological territory that clashed with its buddy cop momentum. Some felt the fight's length disrupted pacing at a critical point in the story. Studio heads, wary of steering the film too far from its intended blend of action and levity, ultimately removed the entire confrontation. In the final cut, the dojo moment is reduced to a fleeting transition, creating an abrupt gap in Kenner's emotional arc. Those who worked on the scene still recall it as one of the film's most atmospheric encounters, a dramatic anchor erased before audiences ever got to see its full weight. Fact 10 Out for Justice's deleted nightclub reckoning. Out for Justice originally featured a brutal extended showdown inside a seedy Brooklyn bar, sequence crafted to reveal just how merciless Gino Foligno could become when cornered. In its uncut form, the scene played like a contained storm, shattered glass erupting underfoot, chairs splintering on impact, and Siegel driving through wave after wave of gang members with relentless efficiency. The choreography emphasized raw dominance, stripping away any trace of restraint. According to crew accounts, this was intended to be the moment where the audience truly understood the weight of Gino's rage. But when the early cut was screened, the audience's reaction shifted dramatically. Many found the fight uncomfortably vicious, noting that the prolonged brutality made the protagonist feel almost predatory. Others wrote that the sequence lingered too long, slowing the narrative and pushing the film into harsher territory than intended. Worried about protecting Siegel's on-screen persona and anticipating a difficult conversation with the ratings board, the studio chose to remove most of the confrontation. What survives in the final release is only a thin silhouette of the original design. The missing nightclub reckoning remains one of Siegel's most infamous unseen moments, a ferocious set piece that never had its full chance to leave an impact. Fact 11. Double Impact's Lost Twin Assault. Double Impact once carried a showcase fight that placed both Van Damme characters side by side in a coordinated assault, a rare moment where the narrative's twin concept was meant to be fully realized in action. Shot inside an industrial compound filled with metal walkways and smoke-filled corridors, the sequence blended wide split-screen compositions with carefully timed stunt double swaps. Alex fought with raw aggression while Chad used cleaner, more tactical strikes, creating a visual contrast the filmmakers hoped would define their dynamic. However, the scene's reception at test screenings revealed a major obstacle. Viewers were distracted by the technical seams of the unfinished optical work, and several commented that the fight's length stalled the story's momentum. The studio, wary of the additional time and resources required to polish the split-screen choreography and trying to maintain a tight pacing, ultimately cut the entire sequence from the film. Today, the missing twin assault is one of the most sought-after lost moments in Van Damme's filmography. Those who saw early work prints insist it had the potential to become a fan-favorite set piece showcasing both characters in a way the final cut never fully achieved. Fact 12. Only the Strong's removed rooftop confrontation. Only the Strong included a visually striking rooftop fight that was meant to serve as a lyrical tribute to the grace and unpredictability of capoeira. Filmed under the glow of city lights, the duel paired Mark Dacascos with a rival fighter whose movements mirrored his own twisting kicks, spinning sweeps, and agile ground transitions. Wind machines swept across the rooftop to give the scene a heightened sense of motion, while the stunt team choreographed the exchange as a rhythmic dance of survival. But when the unfinished cut reached test screening audiences, the response was mixed. Some praised the beauty of the choreography, while others complained that the sequence arrived too close to the film's climax and slowed the momentum. A few noted that the dim lighting and the rough cut made the fast footwork difficult to follow. Studio executives, concerned that the duel would overshadow the final confrontation, decided to remove the entire scene. All that remains of the rooftop confrontation are scattered behind the scenes images and memories from the production team. Many still argue that it was one of the most elegant and expressive fights in the film, a moment that showcased capoeira in a way that American action cinema rarely captured. Fact 13. Lionheart's erased waterfront confrontation. Lionheart once featured a moody, emotionally charged fight on the edge of a shipping dock, a sequence designed to deepen Lion's sense of isolation, long before he stepped into the underground ring. In this removed set piece, early morning fog rolled across metal crates, while distant horns echoed through the harbor. Lion, exhausted and still reeling from the weight of his choices, was ambushed by hired thugs intent on stopping him from reaching his next destination. The struggle that followed wasn't graceful or triumphant. It was messy, desperate, and shot with a raw intimacy meant to expose the fractures beneath Lion's calm exterior. But during the test screening phase, the moment failed to land as intended. Some viewers felt the fight dragged the pacing of the first act, while others argued it made Lion appear too hardened, before audiences had fully connected to his internal conflict. Worse still, a few respondents noted that the confrontation overshadowed the emotional scenes that followed. Faced with these reactions, producers decided the entire waterfront encounter had to be removed. Its absence created a quiet gap in the final film, a missing piece of Lion's transformation that fans still sense when watching the theatrical cut. Crew members often point to this sequence as one of the production's most atmospheric casualties. Fact 14. Marked for Death's deleted compound break-in. Marked for Death originally included a sprawling action sequence inside a drug compound, a maze of steel smoke and improvised weapons that pushed John Hatcher into one of the toughest engagements of the film. The scene followed Hatcher carving his way through narrow corridors filled with gang soldiers dodging machetes, smashing through makeshift barricades, and engaging in a dangerously close-quarters duel that sparked against metal surfaces. According to the stunt team, it was one of the most physically demanding sequences they had constructed. However, once test screening audiences viewed the early cut, the scene immediately raised concerns. Many commented that the violence felt too intense and unusually grim, especially in the context of the film's broader pacing. Others felt the graphic close quarters work risked pushing the film beyond its intended rating. The studio, wary of derailing the film's accessibility and tone, ultimately cut the entire sequence. What survives now are only fragments, brief shots of smoke-filled hallways that hint at a much larger battle. Fans still cite the compound break-in as one of the great unseen sequences of Siegel's early career, lost to the editing room after a single screening. Fact 15: Cyborg's Lost Desert Engagement. Cyborg once included a sweeping confrontation staged across a desolate stretch of wasteland, a fight designed to illustrate the relentless danger that hunted Gibson Rickenbacker long before the film's final act. In this removed scene, Gibson tracked a group of Fender scouts across rolling dunes and jagged rock formations, culminating in an extended clash that blended blade strikes, sand-choked grappling, and a risky stunt involving a fall down a steep embankment. The cinematography emphasized the bleakness of the setting, bathing the fighters in the dying glow of a post-apocalyptic sun. But in its unfinished form, the sequence struggled during test screenings. Some viewers admired the scope, yet many argued that the desert engagement slowed the film's momentum at a critical point. Others felt its bleak tone risked overshadowing the emotional payoff of the later storyline. Cannon Films, already wrestling with financial strain and tight schedules, made the decision to remove the entire set piece. The final cut jumps forward with noticeable abruptness, leaving a phantom outline where the desert fight once stood. For fans and crew alike, the missing sequence remains one of Cyborg's most intriguing unrealized ideas, a fight built to amplify the film's atmosphere, but cut before it could leave its mark. Bonus fact: Red Sun Rising's hidden neon gauntlet. Red Sun Rising once contained a rain-drenched alley confrontation that many on the crew believed would become one of Don the Dragon Wilson's most visually striking set pieces. The fight unfolded beneath flickering neon signage, where puddles reflected shifting colors as Hoshino faced off against 3 assassins armed with blades and a custom-forged chain weapon. The choreography blended tight angular footwork with sudden explosive strikes, each movement punctuated by the metallic scrape of steel across wet pavement. Stunt performers later described the sequence as a perfect balance between gritty martial arts realism and the stylized flair that defined early 90s action cinema. Despite its ambition, the scene stumbled in its first test screening. Viewers noted the amplified sound design, metal whipping through air blades, clashing water exploding underfoot made the violence feel uncomfortably immediate. Others felt the sequence overshadowed the film's later confrontations, disrupting the intended escalation of tension. With concerns growing that the fight might draw unwanted scrutiny from ratings boards or skew the film's pacing, the studio made the decision to remove the entire scene. What remains today are only fragments, a handful of production photos, a few grainy behind-the-scenes clips, and the memories of those who helped bring the neon gauntlet to life. For fans, it has become a symbol of the unseen corners of 90s martial arts cinema, a fully realized confrontation that dazzled in rough footage, but disappeared before it ever reached the public eye. Across these films, entire battles were staged, lit, rehearsed, and fought with full commitment, only to vanish after a single round of private feedback. It makes you wonder how many unforgettable moments in action cinema were erased before audiences ever had a chance to judge them. Now that you've seen what was lost in the cutting room, which of these unseen fights do you believe would have changed its movie the most? And should these sequences have survived, or were the studios right to lock them away?